Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining us today, a true titan of the fantasy football industry. He is a FSGA, FSTA. I mean, he's been a Hall of Famer with the Fantasy Sports Association through various name changes. He's the big guy over at footballdiehards.com. I believe founder. I don't know. Senior editor.
Yes.
Bob Harris. Bob, what the hell's going on, brother?
Yeah, same old, man. Just getting busy. So you're slowing down a little bit, right? Yeah, the race is kind of, we're on the slow down laps and feeling pretty good about things. It went extremely well. I'm really surprised. Well, not surprised. If you listen to me back heading into the season, my prediction was the NFL doesn't care. They're playing a season. And sure enough, they were. I think it's interesting that the season will be remembered mostly for the last game, but a lot of effort went into, pulling this thing off. I think, if you heard Joe Judge's rant, based on the Eagles game, I agree with everything he said. A lot of people made a lot of sacrifices, put a lot of effort in. And the league's determination, they were determined all along to make it happen. And they did a bunch of things to make it happen. And by golly, we got us a season in.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I hate to push back on you right here at the beginning, but to me, I just thought with Joe Judge, I felt like that was kind of some crocodile tears. Let's say that the team that laid down was a team that laid down, allowing his shitty team to make the playoffs. I don't think he would have been complaining about it then.
Could have been a better messenger, but I agreed with the message, right? I mean, that's my point. I get that. In general, all these teams jumped through a lot of hoops, and for one team, look, if it had been an early afternoon window, we wouldn't even be talking about it, right? Yeah. But they got flexed into the Sunday night game, so everyone, playing in front of God and everyone, and they're throwing Nate Sudfeld in there. Come on, guys.
Right. We got this guy in the YouTube comments, Brett Forsyth, saying the shirt and the guitars on the wall tell me this guy knows how to party. That's definitely true, man.
There was a day.
No, hey, Bob's still, man. We do the broadcasts for the draft and stuff, man. Bob always brings the energy, man. He's the life of the party for sure. So you talked about predictions preseason. Let me just ask you, like, right off, just before we talk about some of this other stuff, like how did the season, as long as we're talking about the season going on, we got through the 256 games. Holy shit. There's a lot of talk at the beginning that had me a little bit scared that they're going to try and shut this thing down on us. And then it's like, what the hell do we do? It's like, how did you navigate it? Because you have maybe you could tell people, I probably didn't do the best job introducing you to folks who might not know who you are, but you've been doing this since long before any of us, even in the internet space. You were doing it, like making magazines that people would pick up on the way to their draft parties.
Yeah, I started out doing faxes even, and recording my 900 number and things like that. So started out with the internet when first started getting popular in the early 90s. But I've been doing this since 1993. I work for a company, Fantasy Sports Publications. It's made their first magazine in 1989 with the Pro Forecast. This year's Pro Forecast magazine will be the 32nd. I've been involved with them since 93. So, but been doing this a while, and it was like it was a weird year, but honestly, in the end, it ended up being kind of not weird. Some of the issues with the magazines early on, trying to decide if there was going to be a season or not.
Yeah, how did that even work? Because at least with us with the internet side of things, we don't have to gather raw materials for something you can hold in your hand.
Presses, right?
Yeah. So it's like. And the other thing is that I've always wondered, and maybe I could just ask you about this while we're on this, it's like, how do you make a magazine in June without knowing what the injuries are going to be, without knowing what certain situations are going to unfold? I mean, we do the training camp tour, we do all this stuff where we're trying to knowledge is up to the minute in August. And I know that at the website, maybe was the website created in a way to be like an addendum to what
that's exactly it. Right. So as the two things came together, I was pretty much really into the web thing. The people I work with, Emil Cadlick in particular, did the magazine end of it. And so kind of like chocolate and peanut butter, we collided. And basically, look, we're not stupid. We know the limitations of magazines, right? You have to print them and get them out to stores, and people have to buy them and see them. And we've dialed it in over time. And you basically try and focus more on strategies and that kind of broader information in the magazine. And you give the website as part of the magazine. So basically, if you buy a magazine, you get a subscription to the website. So you get all updated information throughout the summer. If you want to carry on through the season, you pony up a little extra money, but we keep it so that everything in the magazine is built upon on the website, and they work together hand in glove. And that's kind of the idea. Did you guys find yourself in a spot, you and your business? What's your business partner's name? You said
Emo Catholic.
Oh, Emo Cat. All right. So I know him through Twitter, I believe. So when did you guys like? What was it like? Was it a bunch of tough decisions you had to make? It's like, are we going to put the magazine out? Was there ever a point in time where you said maybe this year we don't do it? Like, what were you saying?
Those were all considerations, right? So I was on team from the get-go. I think, so you watch how the NFL went through this, and you can remember back in, early March, even there, people are saying, well, how can they have free agency and pay all these people hundreds of $millions when this thing is starting? And yet there they went. And then you said, how could they have a draft with this horrible thing? And then, then they had a draft. Well, how can they go into training? And then they went in through training camp. So all these things. But early on, it just struck me. And I heard, maybe some inside information from people that worked at the league that Roger Goodell basically was dead set on doing this. So my vote was, let's go. And of course, it's easier to say that when it's not my big pile of cash that's being invested in paper, ink, and et cetera, et cetera. So,
right.
But we did. So what we did was we ended up going with a limited set. We usually do 4.5 titles, basically. We do Pro Forecast, Football Diehards magazine, a Cheat Sheets magazine, we call it, and the Draft Book magazine. And those have all been around for many years. Our newest one is Football Diehards. It's 20 years old this past season. So we just decided to cut back and just go with the Pro Forecast and the Football Diehards magazine. This year we'll bump it back up. But that was kind of the decision-making process, and all the things you said came into play. They were all, and it was all fairly horrifying, not knowing if there was going to be a season, the timing of getting the magazines out, all those things. I mean, it was a little bit of a concern. So all worked out for the best, though, and onward and upward this year, I think.
Well, onward and upward, and something that's fairly horrifying that should segue us into fantasy football talk is the idea of David Montgomery being somebody who finished the season on such a hot streak, Bob. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on Montgomery and the way he finished the season, what you think of that Bears offense, and if you think he's going to be overdrafted in 2021 based on the strength of his performance down the stretch here in 2020.
The big answer is yes. He will be overdrafted based on the strength of his run down the stretch, because that's how we do. I don't necessarily think that's the worst idea, though. I mean, look, we overdraft somebody every year. Almost everybody we draft in the first round, we're overdrafting, I think. Or at least we're drafting based on, sometimes a very narrow band of what we've seen before. Say Saquon Barkley, for example. I mean, he's a great player. I know he's going to be a great player. He's just got to stay on the field. David Montgomery's case, I think the thing that's made the difference this year is, Matt Nagy has decided not to outsmart himself, and let's do the thing that works for us and wins us games. Now, maybe he'll forget all that next year to some degree, but I don't think totally. I think he'd like to keep his job. And I think he knows that winning, and he understands the weaknesses of his quarterbacks, and relying on Mitchell Trubisky to be the tip of the spear of your offense has not worked out for him, right? Same with Nick Foles. Relying on David Montgomery paid him off handsomely. They're heading into the postseason, even if they backed in. I think they'll continue to lean on David Montgomery. Hopefully they keep Allen Robinson on board too. I think that'll be a big factor either way. But, David Montgomery, I think people will be diving in on, it might end up being too rich for my blood. I tend to zig when everyone's zagging, but everyone's going to zig on this one. Everyone's heading his way.
What about talking about other possible worries about guys who are going to be going maybe more highly based on things that happened in 2020 that might not be sustainable? And clearly with David Montgomery for the Bears, it's like that stretch run, that schedule was just so amazing. I mean, anybody with two eyes could have seen it we all did see it.
We all talked about it before,
you were given the advice to, we were all given the same advice, try and get Montgomery for his playoff schedule. But it's like with James Robinson in Jacksonville, I think it's kind of easy to see from a ways out that he might not be dependent on next year for the same kind of volume. That's my view of it. The other view is, well, a new GM, a new head coach, if they're sharp, they might say, look, we got this guy locked up. He's cheap. We have him on an undrafted free agent deal. Let's run the wheels off. Where are you in that? I guess a dichotomy that I have a little bit of trouble kind of breaking up in my head, which side of it that I'm on.
I lean to that side that you just said. Look, we have this commodity. He was great last year. Let's see how this plays out this year. We can invest. They have so many needs on that team, right? And running backs seem to be, apparently according to James Robinson, you can find them anywhere. You don't even have to draft them. So look, so I can remember talking to Byron about this last August, during the training camp tour. And we were running through the whole litany of guys. And I mean, we touched on him, but nobody knew what he was going to be. And it seems like with running backs, opportunity is key. I think whoever comes in is going to realize they have a good player. And depending on their needs at other positions, they have a lot of draft capital. So maybe they can pull something off. But my guess is he is the lead guy. I just, I don't like to, when we're drafting, Alex, this, I draft workloads or anticipated workloads. And I hope the player can deliver. That's like the thing with Montgomery. I mean, I think his workload is going to be better than it was the first half of this year. I don't think the schedule is going to be as fortuitous, right? And with Robinson, I don't think the new coaching staff is necessarily going to be as all in on playing a single back. That's the question for me. It seemed like the Jaguars, no matter what was going on, they were going with one guy and they were giving him the ball. Game script be damned. They didn't care because they didn't have a lot of options, right? I think if a new staff comes in, they'll think they have more options. They'll try to diversify the offense a little bit more. And maybe we won't see that same kind of workload for Robinson. That would be the concern for me.
But talk about another running back that should concern you. And I don't even think Todd Gurley, I don't think is even worth discussing for fantasy anymore. But I'm just curious for you, in all your years doing this, do you think there's a chance that he's not even on a 53-man roster?
Yes, entirely possible he's not on a 53-man roster.
He looks so bad, and I wonder if it.
Think about the Rams. There's a reason the Rams paid him a bunch of money to go away.
Right. Well, but I mean, is Todd Gurley an isolated? As you just think back about this, and we think about dynasty, and I have Byron during the Houston Texans game texting me saying, look, we need to get Derrick Henry way. I don't care his age. We need to get him way, or the wear and tear. We need to get him way up in our dynasty rankings, just because it's like every time we argue about it, he's like, dude, just watch him. And I do, and I'm just like, but these running back, it feels like they can blow a tire, and then it feels weird. Is this Todd Gurley thing something that should be any kind of cautionary tale we take away from it about running backs in dynasty?
Sure, just like we should have with DeMarco Murray, like we should have with Arian Foster, with any number of guys. The fall tends to be precipitous and quick, right? I mean, it just it happens. Look, so when I watch Derrick Henry run, I don't see him taking the kind of punishment I see most backs taking. But is he, adding the wear and tear? I always talk about something, and I think it's more pertinent with the bigger wide receivers, but the physics of the game. I mean, when you're that big and that fast, just the body isn't designed. The joints aren't designed to handle that kind of beating. And you look at some of these, 6'5", 240-pound wide receivers who leap up into the air and land on their back. And I mean, you do that over and over. It takes a toll, I think, more quickly than it does on the smaller guys. I think that maybe the same could be said for Henry. But what I will say for Henry is nobody is landing a big blow on him. He is not taking big shots. He's not taking repeated shots.
Which is odd because he presents so much surface area.
Right. But I think that's part of his style, because it allows him to deliver the blows. And look, at some point he's going to, it's going to add up. The workload is going to add up. Those are still, we just see the thud and, we hear a little thud on our television. Those are big hits he's taken every single time. But he is a very large man, very powerful, very fast. I like a lot of things about him. But I would guess his fall will be equally precipitous at some point. I don't think we're there yet, though. I think we're still a couple of years away with him, or at least a good year away from him.
What about Alvin Kamara and dynasty? Because I'm not sure. I've always been the biggest Drew Brees guy there is. Hell, he was my quarterback in high school. I've known him since we were kids. And I'll tell you what, man, I'm starting to feel my age, and so I think that Drew probably is starting to feel his.
Please,
yeah, Drew's probably starting to feel his age in some particular ways too. We've seen a little bit with this year with all the rib stuff, but just the arms. There's been arm strength concerns for the last 2 or 3 years. So. Now we've gotten to see what Alvin Kamara is in the receiving game with Taysom Hill. It was concerning because the Saints have behind the scenes, and it seems like publicly, just through the money, through the things that Sean Payton has said, it feels like that's their guy of the future. What do you? I'm looking at these startup drafts because we're starting to get, we're getting into the startup draft season now, and for Dynasty, and a few I've seen Alvin Kamara go 3rd overall, and to me, I just worry a little bit that his receiving might not be there. Do you share these same concerns, or do you have a case for Alvin Kamara being taken that highly still in Dynasty startups?
He's going to be taken highly, but I share in your concerns for sure. And again, you're looking for pass to workload. One of the pass to workload has been Drew Brees' targeting of him. And we saw that just wasn't happening with Taysom Hill. I don't know that changes materially. And also the other concern with Taysom Hill is there's, it's kind of like when Cam Newton is your quarterback or whatever, there's some concern, or Lamar Jackson for that matter. There's some concern that the quarterback is the biggest vulture on the team. And that's always a worry. But I'm with you. I think that, his ability to make plays, especially as a receiver, is one of the things that makes him so remarkable. Look, he's a great player either way. But for fantasy purposes, I want him to get the ball in his hands as much as he can. And I do have some concerns based on what we saw from Taysom Hill. The numbers bore it out.
All right, let's talk about redraft, early redraft ADPs for 2021 because we're ridiculous maniacs.
We
All
are.
right, and so I'm gonna give you a player, and I'm gonna give you a proposed ADP for a 1 quarterback league, just as regular an old league as you can imagine, a home league in 2021, 1 quarterback, half point PPR, 12 teamer. The kind of league that everybody calls into the channel asking their questions about, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's start off with Miles Sanders. You over under the 2-3 turn. Pick 211. Pick 2.11.
He'll go higher.
Really? You don't think
based on people are going to look at what they saw down the stretch with Jalen Hurts, unlocked his playmaking ability. That's what we've known about.
That's what they're going to say, aren't they?
That's what they're going to draft based on.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that they're right, but that's where he's going to go.
Okay, because with do you think that, Bob? Like, do you think that Jalen Hurts could be the tide that kind of lifts all boats? Because the Saints game was awesome.
No, I don't think he is. I don't think we've seen the full story. I don't think that full story is unfolded yet.
Okay. Well, how about Zeke? Let's say middle of the second round, 2.05.
That's honestly, you sounds like you're nailing some of this. That seems like a pretty reasonable place. I might go a little higher on him. I'm expecting maybe a little bit of a rebound. Once all the pieces are back, maybe offensive line gets a little bit more together. But I think this is going to be a perceived landing spot for him. It might even be a little high based on, the letdown that people had.
Well, if that's a little high to me, I would say that could we get a bargain on Zeke next year?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm looking for. Look, the first thing I'm going to do as soon as I clear the cobwebs out of my head this week is I'm going to make a list of everyone who disappointed all of us, right? And those are going to be guys I target in drafts because they're going to be cheaper. I'm going to get a little bit of an edge, and I'm old, mean, and cheap, all of those things. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to leverage some of the disappointment that people feel and trying to gain a little advantage with it. I think Zeke's one of those guys that will allow you to do that.
And you talk, and then you can, like, the more I think about it, it's like you get Dak back. That helps the whole offense. You get another year with guys like CeeDee Lamb getting involved. It's like that kind of helps.
I think the offensive line was a big deal this year as well.
Yeah, the OL back healthy. So, yeah, I like that. All right, what about a few more running backs? What about Josh Jacobs? I'll say pick 2.08.
I'll draft him there. It's a pretty good, drafting workloads. I think that's not unreasonable. Might be a little high in PPR because despite all their chatter that they're going to get him more involved in the passing game, no, they're not.
Yeah, they just won't. No, they just won't. So they lie every year, and there's going to be another. They're going to tell us at the combine.
They do
that we're getting into phase 3, And phase 3 involves the pass receptions.
It's possible, like the DUI thing drives his value down a little bit. If there's some talk of suspension early on, and maybe then if look, I'm always looking for, the burning building of value so I can run in and drag the body out. Right. And,
right.
So if something's driving the price down, I'm going, oh, really?
Well, what about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was good through stretches, but it felt like as the season went on, his role began feeling less and less dependable. I said 4.01. I think
that's low.
What do you think? I think it's too low. Okay.
He's gonna go higher than that. And people, look, I'm hoping for a year 2, renaissance. And we see this with running backs on occasion. That first year doesn't necessarily go as well. And the hopes were so high for him. And that's another thing, though, with the pricing is people are going to be very disappointed. Anyone who drafted him after Damian Williams opted out and started paying that 1.6 right off the bat is never going to want to draft him again. Right? They've had it. They've had enough of this nonsense, and they'll move on. And so if he falls into the 4th round, I'll be buying like crazy.
What about the other rookie who went later than him? Not necessarily in Dynasty. These guys were basically being argued amongst the people who I think were on the right path with their evaluations was Jonathan Taylor. And now, geez.
To be fair, I overpaid for him like a maniac all this past season, right?
Well,
I think I bought as early as I think I probably was buying him earlier than anyone I know, and I think my earliest was like 1 or 2-1, 2-2.
Okay,
I was going that early. I had really big expectations for him, and what I see down the stretch is what I expected all season long. I don't know that I'll still expect that all season long this year. There are going to be other guys in the mix, but I do think that what we're seeing now is more representation of what his skill set what his skill set can do if that team is playing the kind of offense I expected him to play. So I'll be overdrafting him again.
All right, but what about like at 1.07?
It's about where I was drafting Joe Mixon this past year, so I'll hurt myself again. Yes,
I don't think it's going to hurt you, man. JT, dude, is the JT.
I think it is too, right? I mean, and the only thing that would slow my roll a little bit is overpaying this year. But even at that, I'm willing to compound my mistakes. I'm not afraid of that. I've been around the block enough to know I can screw up badly twice in a row, and I'll live it.
One more running back. Maybe this guy will get to round 4. What about Myles Gaskin? Early round 4. Do you think his ADP will settle there? Or
yeah, I think people aren't going to trust this, right? I mean, Miami will play whoever they have at the moment, and things may change with the draft this year or with free agency. I don't think they're convinced. And look, I'm not convinced either. I mean, I could any given week, Salvon Ahmed was as good as Myles Gaskin. It's just that they seem to prefer Gaskin. That's the only thing he has going for him right now. I think that's worth a 4th round pick. I don't think it's worth any higher.
And the thing is, yeah, it's like because they had these other guys fill in. Ahmed looked okay.
They were fine.
But once Gaskin was back, he was like, they forgot about everybody else again.
76%, 75% snap counts. Yep.
All right. What about some wide receivers? Who goes first next year? Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen?
Jefferson will go first.
What about Julio Jones or DK Metcalf?
Metcalf will go first.
What about AJ Brown or Keenan Allen?
Look, Keenan Allen went really late this year, right? I mean, He'll do it again this year. Maybe Justin Herbert.
You don't think people think Herbert?
Right, I think Herbert maybe will change that a little bit. But honestly, the new coaching staff will have something to say about that for me because I was one of the people willing to pay up for Allen. I had him on every roster. But I mean, they used the usage of him as, a glorified tight end, basically, he runs those over the middle routes. I'd like him to get a little more premium looks and maybe a new, I don't know, Joe Brady. I don't know, maybe, a more offensive.
God, Joe Brady with Justin Herbert.
Right. A more offensive minded coach would maybe be pretty appealing there. I'm going to say on Herbert. All right. So it seemed like coming in, the knock on him, and you can maybe fill this in for me more, was as much about his demeanor as anything. Right. And he to me, he looks like one of those guys that turns out like he doesn't have a lot to say until you put him in his element. And then he just does his thing. And I looked at the way he played this year. He was so aggressive. And so, I mean, it's, not just throwing the ball downfield, but when it came time to stick his helmet in the middle of a linebacker's chest, whatever it was, he just looks like he's comfortable playing football.
He's awesome. He's just, he's a pleasure to watch, dude.
Yeah,
absolutely. Love him. And what we've seen, I mean, admittedly, it's the very top of my range of expectations. I mean, I always knew that the potential was there for him to be this kind of player, but Jesus, like, it really is he's basically as good as I could ever imagine him being. So he's just been a wonderful surprise.
And think about it, he didn't have his full range of weapons for, big chunks of the season. All the pieces weren't there for him.
And how bad is it that this idiot Anthony Lynn, like, he wouldn't have started him until week 10 or something like that.
Probably not
punctured Tyrod's lung doing that, whatever. But all right, and then one final one here. And this one to me is kind of hard as I'm trying to put together just the skeleton of the best ball cheat sheets and figure this out. Like, who do you think people are going to choose between Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller?
It might come down to the fact that Fuller's going to miss a game, right?
Yeah,
that'll probably drive people off him. Look, and probably shouldn't drive them off as much as it will. But these things stick in our mind a little bit. And some of this is going to depend on how the contracts play out, right? I mean, Fuller, Deshaun Watson would certainly like Will Fuller back. I'd like Will Fuller back. To me, he was one of the guys that I was investing in like a maniac this year. Because sure. Why? 6th round, 5th round. He started climbing a little bit towards the end, but you could get, I think I could remember drafts where I was getting him 7th round easily, and people were just avoiding him because he's hurt. He's always just, but when he's on the field, he's a wide receiver 1. He gives you a lever over all the other guys that drafted in that range. I'm all about him. And I'll hope that 1 game suspension drives people off him.
All right. So wanted to ask you just a couple of random questions here before asking you a little bit about fantasy playoff kind of general strategy, if you have any takes or tips for that, or if you're playing any of that stuff this year. But just to go, like, I figured I got Bob Harris on the pod. It is officially resolution season. I know that you've had a weight loss journey that you've chronicled through your various social pages and stuff like that. But yeah, you lost a ton of weight. Probably a while back. I mean, you've been the same size since I've known you. But
yeah, it was over the course of time. I probably was up well over 400 pounds, and over the course of about 8-9 years, I lost a couple 100 pounds. Just kind of grinding away at the stone, exercising every day, dialing in my nutrition, etc.
Well, so I mean, people on this show, kind of in between the lines, whenever Byron and I are talking, they hear about all the virtues of going out and collecting your own meat and having that kind of kind of diet with the hunting and fishing, but you do it a different way. And I'd like to hear. So, are you still doing the? Last time we talked, you were doing like the vegan or plant-based.
Basically plant-based. Like it wasn't a religious conversion or anything. If somebody came and slapped me in the face with a hunk of elk and some of it in my mouth, I'd be okay. But I generally don't. What I'm looking for is just. The program I follow is basically I eat a couple pounds of vegetables a day, pound of raw vegetables, pound of cooked vegetables. I eat a fair amount of beans. There's some rice involved, but
how much? When I'm trying to picture a pound of raw vegetables, what am I picturing here? Like 2 squash and some kind of
about a pound of spinach and ground up in a drink.
Oh, okay. So like a pound. I guess a pound is like a couple of vegetables. Is that like a bag of squash?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a bag of spinach?
A bag of spinach would be. So I usually mix it in with other stuff, kale or greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, whatever. And there's other stuff, a lot of tomatoes, a lot of onions, a lot of peppers. So, it's kind of just scramble around and figured out the things I like and use them. Because honestly, the funny thing about this was I was not a big vegetable eater. I hated vegetables, mostly because when you grew up when I did in the 60s, your mom cooked vegetables into a mush.
Mm-hmm. And that was the same with my mom in the 80s too.
And so it turns out like fresh vegetables, raw vegetables, well-prepared vegetables are all pretty damn tasty. And I don't really have an issue with it. And it's been like, this is my 4th year of it. And I don't miss meat at all. And part of this is, working on the insides of your body and making sure, trying to work for longevity. I'm 800 now. I'm looking to live till I'm 1,000. And that's a part of it. So when I do check in with the doctor and stuff, his happiness at all the blood chemistry and the things where I'm at, where I wasn't at before, seemed to be a good idea. And daily exercise is really important. It's hard during the season, but I still get in at least an hour. Now it's not the season. I do 2 hours a day. And I push myself pretty hard for old people. So I think that's really important too. Keep moving and just watch your nutrition. And what I'm doing, I'm not saying is the right thing for everybody. I mean, you can, look, there are heavy meat-based diets or what. I have friends who, believe in the keto kind of diets and everything and almost have nothing but meat. So, I don't think there's any one. It's just like fantasy questions, right? I want this guy or this guy. Well, there's a range of outcomes for both of those guys, and there's not necessarily a wrong answer. You're going to find out after the fact. So I think there's a lot of ways to I would say skin that cat, but my cat is behind me and he doesn't like it when I say it. Right.
Okay. All right. So just a couple of questions off of that. Have you tried and do you like these substitute sort of meat products like the Beyond Meat or these kind of these like what do you think about that? Like lab grown meat? Would you eat it or is it like
Beyond Meat? I do about once a month. Like I said, I don't really miss meat, so I never really felt like a great need for it, but I started trying it and some of it's pretty good and they do a really good job. So I don't mind having a Beyond Beef burger. I'll cook one once or twice a month maybe and enjoy it. But and I think they do a really good job with them. They cook up. It's mostly about texture, but they use a lot of pea protein, which is pea protein is protein in peas peas have as much protein as beef, right? I mean, per 100 grams or whatever, you actually more. So, I mean, I think there's ways to get the protein, and that's the key is getting the protein. I use some supplements and stuff like, I'm a big user of like Shakeology. I'm a Beachbody workout fan, so I use all their products and stuff. And so I drink the Shakeology that they've had out for 100 years. I was doing that before I went plant-based. Now I use their vegan version of that product. And so honestly, the thing I thought was, this is going to be impossible. I can't do this. I had never considered, like myself to be a vegetable eater. I was a meat eater, loved meat. I just don't know if meat loves us. I think everything in moderation is fine. Again, I'm not telling anyone, oh, don't eat meat. It's horrible for you. No, I'm just trying something different. And if in 5 more years I go back to eating meat, it would not be a total shock depending on how I feel.
Do you find yourself eating the same thing all the time for dinner? Like, yes, you do. Like, what's a typical Bob Harris dinner? Like,
so I have like a kind of a
salad, or is
I track everything, right? I use an app called MyFitnessPal that allows you to track every single thing, track all my workouts, all my nutrition, and that just to make sure I'm on point. And so the easy way to do that is I copy meals from one day to the next. So I eat the same thing every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday. So I just copy it over. But a lot of it is very similar things. There's a lot of rice and beans with like 4 days a week, it'll be rice and beans and something else, whatever the vegetable of the day is for that day. Or some days, different things. I eat a lot of pasta that is like not pasta, but legume pasta, like whether it's, I'll eat a lot of green lentil, red lentil pasta, chickpea pasta. And it's all fine. And so a lot of things like that.
So the other food thing I wanted to ask you about, just since you're from New Mexico, I'm not sure that I mentioned that earlier. You live in Santa Fe, or where do you live? I live
in Albuquerque. I've lived here for about 20 some years. I'm from Tucson originally. So
okay.
Southwestern all the way.
Why do New Mexican people love green chili so much? Why do you guys love that?
They grow in here. So I said I came from Tucson, where we eat more Sonoran Mexican food, right? Mm-hmm. More tomato based, more jalapeno peppers, different kinds of peppers and things like that. And I love that as well. I've come to love the way they do it here. The green chilies are pretty delicious. I probably eat some green chilies almost every day, I guess.
Right, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, throw some in, and it just seems to be a local thing. Also, the red chili is a big thing here. If you order food here, they'll ask you literally red or green. So like everything you get at a Mexican restaurant, they're going to ask you that question, red or green. And you say Christmas because you want some of both, like Alvin Kamara's shoes. But the green chili, it's a good taste. They fire roast them. It's a big deal here. You go to the store and there's a big fire roasting vat outside the store, and they'll roast them right up for you. My neighbors across the street every year, they'll buy a couple 100 pounds and pull their roaster out into the driveway and roast them. And it's a big ass deal here.
A couple 100 pounds. What do? Do they give them away to the neighbors?
Some of them they give away. Some of them they freeze. Like I have a ton in my freezer right now.
Well, I'll bet you got a neighbor that grills up 100 pounds every year, man.
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
Okay, all right, man. Again, he's Bob Harris. Find him on Twitter. It's just at Football Diehard on Twitter, right? I'm sure you guys are already following him, but if not, give him a follow over there. Of course, you can hear what is your upcoming program schedule on Sirius for
Lord.
Is it about to change?
I think it did change already. So Football Diehard show gave way on Monday night and Friday nights to other shows. Lisa Ann's back, and I think Kyle and Ray are back on Fridays. So Lisa Ann and Ronis are on those nights. So Dempsey and I are back on our usual off-season Saturday nights, 3 hours. And also we alternate on Fantasy Dirt with Michael Fabiano in the week. So you can hear one of us from 6 to 8 with Fabiano. And so this week it'll be 3 days of Dempsey and 2 days of me. Next week it'll be 3 days of me, 2 days of Dempsey, and we'll just do that all off season.
And dude, to be honest, my favorite episodes of those shows, I know you guys like doing it daily during the season, but man, those 3 hour shows during the off season those are my favorite.
Honestly, that's all I did. I think that's the most value comes where we can just dive deep, and we do. We'll bring in beat writers from just all the teams and go deep, do a full 15, 20 minutes with each of them, and then sit back and talk it through and figure out what we like about players. I agree with you. I think those are really useful, and I love doing them.
One other thing I love doing before I get you out of here, Bob, is playing in these playoff fantasy leagues. You got any? Are you playing in any this year? Yeah. Do you have any tips or tricks you'd like to share with the people? Any general strategy or any particular takes about this year, where we have a really cool 6-game slate coming up
I don't know if there's any secret stuff that I could share with anyone other than, if you're just getting into like a postseason long tournament, pick a side. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's the obvious thing. If you haven't done it before, pick a NFC or AFC quarterback at the onesie positions at least, right? And roll with that conference throughout. So if the Super Bowl comes, you at least have a quarterback left from the other conference, so you don't get caught short, or tight end or whatever.
Whenever we look at this week's games, just for people who are in one and done contests, let's just look wild card weekend, and maybe we can just talk about some plays for this weekend, because we always want to look at players for teams, at least in week one of the wild card, that we think are probably going to lose, right, but who have stud players. So whenever we look at the Bills versus the Colts, the Bills are the 2 seed, the Colts are the 7 seed. Obviously, does anything stand up to you? Because Jonathan Taylor stands out to me as kind of a week one play.
And you could pivot to the receivers. I think, T.Y. Hilton is the guy that you'd probably want to play. I don't know how enthusiastic I am. And obviously, Tre'Davious White will be back, so that's a little bit of an issue. But I don't know if Hilton is a shadow level guy anymore. So, but I think that's a low level play. That if you're kind of going through the seeds and stems at the end of the thing, he's there. Right.
And then what do you feel about? Do you ever look ahead to say like, well, I think if the Bills might eventually get the Ravens, should I use Stephon Diggs a little bit earlier? I don't know but that's just something that you should also be thinking about.
Right. Those are all the calculations. You'll know in advance who the range of 4 opponents is for whatever, the teams that are coming out of buys or the teams going forward. Here's the possible outcomes. Well, I don't necessarily like both of those outcomes, or one of those outcomes doesn't seem especially beneficial to me. So maybe I'll fire the Diggs shell right now.
What about this? It's kind of hard to decide what you're going to do with Derrick Henry in one and done, because they're playing the Ravens. Not the best matchup, but then you might lose the ability to play Derrick Henry because it's really so. That's another thing.
I don't know if there's a bad matchup for him, and I might just get him out of the way, out of concerns that they aren't going to make it past. I think this has the, we look back to last year. I mean, there could be some points scored in this game. And I think there could be a fair amount of offense on both sides. So I would be afraid to play offensive players in either side.
What about looking at the NFC just quickly here? The 2 seed Saints are playing the 7 seed Bears, and the Bears, I think the Bears lose that. Yeah, but they have a couple of pretty good fantasy options there, and David Montgomery and Allen Robinson. So
I'd probably be Robinson in. And, every time I say the Saints play great against opposing runners, they don't. So I probably wouldn't be shy. I probably would shy off Montgomery.
And then finally, man, we got to hope that the Seahawks get past the Rams because because we don't want to use DK Metcalf versus these guys. I mean, do we?
Seattle's offense, I mean, we keep talking, about their defense is getting better. It's not getting great. It's getting better, but their offense is getting exponentially lousier. I mean, just the point totals haven't been there. And it seems like, whatever the issue is, Russell Wilson, they are not letting him cook or he's not cooking, one or the other. So I'd probably be dialed back on that passing attack. And maybe, I wouldn't mind playing Chris Carson, assuming he's on the up and up. It seemed like, what did he have? Did it look like something happened to his ear? Maybe he lost an earring. That probably won't be that serious.
Well, I noticed that he still had the earring in, so okay. I don't think that I'm not sure that the bleeding was related to that. And then finally, do you think that the football team? How is the football team higher seeded than the Bucks?
Their championship.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess maybe would you even want to play Antonio Gibson versus this Bucks defense?
No. Well, there's going to be no Devin White. We know that for sure. I think they get, probably some of the other pieces back. I think McClendon didn't test positive. I think Shaq Barrett didn't test positive. So I think those guys will be back. But Devin White's a big piece of that defense, right? So yeah, I think they get Carlton Davis back too. So look, I'm not looking to force football team guys into my lineup for any reason. I mean, I thought McLaurin, a heroic, valiant effort on his part. I don't think he's still okay. And I don't think this is going to be a great game, but don't like his quarterback play. So probably wouldn't be trying to shoehorn any football teamers into my lineup this week.